Thank you for joining us today. I'm Barry Schwartz, Chief Investment Officer at Baskin Wealth Management, and I'm joined, as always, with Ernest Wong, Head of Research at Baskin Wealth. What have you been researching lately, Ernest?
Well, I thought you were going to ask about the weather because it's finally starting to feel like fall.
Yeah, that means golf season is coming to an end in Toronto, which is very, very sad. But pickleball season starts soon. Have you tried out pickleball yet?
Thought that's for not generally for my cohort.
Everybody can play it. It's lots of fun. You play ping pong, right?
I actually won a ping pong tournament when I was in high school.
Really?
I still have like the little trophy. Anyways,
I'm proud that I can still beat my kids at ping pong, even though they think they're better than me. So talking today, our feature discussion is a company that we've owned not for a long time, but a newish name to our portfolio and one that we've been filling out over the last 6 months or so. And we're excited to talk about it. It's an idiosyncratic type company. It's not one that appears as one of the largest mega cap names. It's not one that maybe a lot of people have heard of. So we'll break that down, and I'm very excited to discuss that. But first, we want to discuss antitrust. Department of Justice lawsuits against a lot of our companies, Ernest. I think Google has 2 or 3 of them. Visa just got an antitrust lawsuit. Live Nation, one that we've talked about recently on our podcast, as well, an antitrust lawsuit. Are we in bed, Ernest, with a lot of terrible monopolist companies that harm consumers and their customers? Or is it regulation that has gone a little bit overboard and concerns about these wildly profitable companies? So let's get into antitrust, what it means for the companies that we own in our portfolio, and is it noise or does it really matter? So Ernest, your overall thoughts about antitrust.
so the reason that this discussion is being brought up is because yesterday, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit, antitrust lawsuit against Visa for allegedly monopolizing the U.S. debit market.
And so debit market is debit cards. Most people think of Visa and MasterCard as issuing credit cards, but they offer debit cards. I don't think, is debit cards popular, Visa debit cards popular in Canada, or is it really more of a U.S. type business for them?
There is Visa debit here as well, but obviously the issue at hand is the U.S. debit market, and I don't want to get into the weeds of it because it gets quite technical about how exactly do debit networks work. What is Visa doing to steer volumes towards their own networks? But the very core of the issue is a pattern that we are seeing with recent Department of Justice antitrust lawsuits, which is that what the Department of Justice doesn't like here is that Visa is essentially paying merchants. So think of Walmart or Amazon, for example, to use the Visa debit processing network. And Visas might give them, I don't know, $20 million, $30 million and say, hey, you got to use our network to process all your debit transactions.
So giving them an incentive, a reason to use or switch from another processing network. Okay.
And this has been a new focus for the Department of Justice. We've seen this with the Google case, where the Department of Justice doesn't like that Google is paying Apple to be the default search engine on Safari.
So these companies, I guess the thought process is Google and Visa are so big, they generate so much cash flow, they're so profitable that they're using their girth, their size to
make payments.
To make payments that other competitors could not obviously afford, right? So if you and I started a new search engine and we wanted to get traction, we don't have the money to pay Apple to direct traffic to us. If we wanted to start a new processing network, we can't compete against Visa and MasterCard. It's as simple as that.
Yes, but and then we saw this again with the Live Nation lawsuit, where part of the core issue is that Ticketmaster is paying venues to be the ticketing platform for these for their concerts.
Isn't this a common practice though in all businesses?
Yes, and so I don't really want to get into the. I don't really have an opinion
No.
as to the legality of, or whether the government should be getting into like private commercial negotiations. But that is a theme that we're seeing with the Department of Justice.
That's right.
That is common across all of these lawsuits.
So antitrust lawsuits they want to encourage competition, right? Which makes sense. You don't want to stifle competition, but at the same time, you need to prove that your suppliers are harmed in a situation, your customers are harmed, and so these will be negotiated in the courts. And we can assume that Visa and Google and Apple and all these companies that have received these antitrust lawsuits have very well trained lawyers who know the ins and outs of antitrust.
And I think more importantly is that it gets very tricky into defining who exactly is being harmed here. And the reason that it's hard is because you have to be able to say, well, why should this party be favored over the other party, right? So why shouldn't Walmart be allowed to accept money, make money versus the consumers that are, being forced to use the Visa debit network?
Fair enough.
So it's very difficult, and we'll see how it plays out.
That's right. No one should expect in any of these cases an immediate settlement or an immediate, the courts going through the courts and a judge approving remedies. These things take time. There's also an appeals process. Maybe the government is being political in some of these situations and may not have a full case. Ultimately, it could take for some of these cases 2 to 3 years to prove out. And you can assume that even if a lot of these companies do lose their antitrust lawsuits, they will set aside a sum to correct, and it still may be the case where their businesses are harmed. Obviously, for Visa, as a consumer, we may read the headlines, we may see the stock price go down, but we're still going to be using our Visa debit and credit cards.
No, and I think that's an important point, because even if the worst case scenario, Visa loses the antitrust case, their debit processing is not going to go to zero tomorrow.
Yeah.
They still, as the document laid out very clearly, Visa still has a network effect.
That's right.
They're still going to have a very high market share of debit processing just by virtue of who they are. So it's, I think, just because I think investors shouldn't necessarily overreact to these kinds of things.
Yeah.
They should look carefully to what portion of the business is being impacted, what's the likely outcome, and in most cases, it might not even be that material.
That's right. And ultimately, consumers and suppliers do have a choice, right? Costco in Canada, I don't think you can use a Visa card. You have to use an Amex or MasterCard.
You have to use MasterCard.
MasterCard, right? So they've said you can't use your Visa here. So that harms consumers.
Yes.
Right? And Walmart, I think, has created its own debit network, right? So it's bypassed the Visa.
Not sure about that.
Not sure about that, but the bottom line is there could be options for customers, but we'll see what happens. Ultimately, Ernest, I think you made the right point. Is it going to affect their business? Is it going to be material? These are the things that you need to spend time on and research on. It does seem to be in the past that an antitrust lawsuit does go to show you that probably you own a very good business. And generally speaking, stocks tend to do well over time. And even if with an antitrust lawsuit, doesn't mean that the stock is going to be harmed in the short or medium term.
That's well said.
Yeah. And obviously you saw years ago the breakup of Standard Oil, the breakups of the telcos. those if you would have held on to all those pieces over the long term, you would have done very, very well. So it's not like these businesses are going to go to zero or end up the way of the dodo bird anytime soon. But the world is very competitive, and you have to obviously keep abreast of all these situations, what happens. Anything else you want to add on the antitrust that we missed?
One side note for those people who like learning about businesses and industries is that Department of Justice antitrust cases, like the actual filings, they generally do an extraordinarily good job
Yeah.
of explaining how the industries work. So the explanation in the case about how debit networks work, what's their function, what role they provide to consumers, is the best explanation I've ever read about this topic. So for those of you who are interested in not just debit networks, but maybe like the concert industry, for example, like those things are worth a very valuable source of research.
They're very good primers, industry primers, and I think we mentioned something similar when Apple got its Department of Justice antitrust lawsuit. As you read through it, you're like, wow, Apple has really done an amazing job of building its business. So, Ernest, the feature discussion today is a company that maybe competes a little bit with Apple on some of their products, and the company is called Garmin. So when Ernest first brought this idea to the investment committee, many of us are familiar with, of course, the Garmin watches, but many of us weren't familiar with that Garmin is in a multiple line of businesses. We can all remember years ago when we didn't have GPS in our cars, that we had these Garmin products that we would attach to our lighters, and that would be the way that we would be able to figure out how to get from point A to point B. That business has been almost eviscerated as cars now come with CarPlay and navigation systems. But Garmin has done an incredible job of pivoting its business from once being a company with GPS to so many other different business lines. So Ernest, this is your investment idea. It's the one that you brought to the investment committee. And so why don't you talk about the reasons, the ups and downs and pros and cons of Garmin for our listeners.
So Garmin, as you noted, most people, when they think of Garmin, they still think of the car GPS systems that my dad might have had 20 years ago in the car that you stick on the mirror.
Yep. I've got one in like a velvet bag in the basement. I don't know. Maybe I can sell it to someone. But put on Facebook Marketplace. But anyways, yeah.
But Garmin is much more than that today. And this is part of the reason that we invested in it as well, is that they used about 40% of the business, even maybe 10, 15 years ago, used to be from these GPS systems.
Yep.
But recognizing early on that this was a declining market and going to be facing competition from a wide range of competitors, they successfully pivoted the business, the management, into 5 different end markets, which include their largest business today is watches.
Yep.
So watches for sports like biking, for golf,
Yep.
for swimming. They have a wide portfolio of watches, and they have, and in these markets, they have a very, very high market share for what they do. So
they're not the only company selling watches for, we'll call them extreme type sports or what have you. There's competition from other companies as well as Apple.
So, for example, the Forerunner watch is the main watch that they provide for marathon runners, and they have, I think, something like 80% market share of all marathon watches because it's specifically designed for marathon running.
Yeah.
It's not like a Apple Watch, which kind of does a little bit of everything. Yeah. It really tracks your performance very well for running.
Yeah.
And that's what Garmin does throughout its portfolio. They do watches. They have a big aviation business, so making things like cockpit controls and avionics for private jets.
Yeah.
And little planes. And they also have a boating segment, so making specialized tools like chart plotters, like fish finders, those kinds of things. And it's a surprisingly good business, these products, because they're so niche that there's not a lot of competition. But if you want to participate in that activity, you want the best performing one. And Garmin is the one that usually makes that product.
Yeah. So for golf, if you're playing golf, you're pretty much going to use a Garmin watch. You can trust the quality. You can trust that the accuracy, and there's the more you can spend as much money as you want. There's all of them have different features as well. And I think every few years people tend to upgrade those products, kind of like the Apple Watch. The features get better, the products tends to wear out, and so it's remained the market leader for a long time in specialty watches and for those type of activities. Correct?
And it's surprisingly hard to disrupt, even for someone like Apple, because again, the Apple Watch is a general product.
Yeah.
It's not going to be able to do all of these tasks as well as a dedicated product for that thing.
Now,
So
someone would say to you, Ernest, what about the Apple Watch Ultra, which is a higher end watch that does a lot more things? What would be your response back to the Apple Watch Ultra maybe being a Garmin killer?
well, it has been a like a meaningful competitor to the market. Is we're not saying that Garmin has a monopoly for these things.
Oh my God, we don't need another antitrust lawsuit. Yeah, go ahead.
But Garmin still competes it especially well because number one, like again, their products are focused on that market. They have like very good engineering. So some of their watches have like perpetual batteries.
Yeah.
Like, it never runs out. Even the Watch Ultra isn't able to do that.
And the design and the fit are specific to that sport, right?
Yes.
Maybe a golf watch, because you don't want it interfering with your swing, will feel different than a marathoner's watch or a freediver's watch or a hunter's watch. I don't know. I'm making up, obviously.
There's no hunter's watch.
Well, okay. Well, Garmin should
Not yet,
obviously
at least.
should follow my idea here, but you know what I mean.
Yes. No, but the other thing that might be a little underappreciated is Garmin's distribution advantage. So if you're an enthusiast for fishing, you might go to a fishing store.
Yes.
And then there might be a Garmin rack for fishing
There are.
tools, like
Yes.
the things that exist there. There's no Apple Watch Ultras in the fishing store,
No.
right?
Good point.
Those are specific to the Apple Store and Best Buy and those channels. And so if you go into Golf Town, like you see a large Garmin rack,
There is a large Garmin rack. Yeah.
and that's what you're probably going to be buying.
Yeah, and I've been eyeing a Garmin watch, and if my wife ever watches or listens to this podcast, this is what I want for Hanukkah. Yeah.
And so Garmin has this amazing track record of finding these niches, creating the best product that they can create, and growing together with that market.
Yeah.
And they've done this across their portfolio, and it's been very successful for them.
Okay, so that represents how much of their business, the watch segment.
So watches are about half of their business today across what they call fitness and outdoor.
Okay.
So that includes like general exercise watches that they have, but also the more specialized, like the marathon watches, the outdoor watches that never run out battery.
Yeah.
Like the swimming watches and the golf watches.
So Ernest, we saw during the pandemic that.
Sorry.
Oh, what?
And then
I interrupt you?
and then the other half of the business is their aviation business and the marine business, and they also have a small but growing automotive business.
All right, so let's get into those parts in a second. But the question I was going to ask you is, for the watches, maybe a skeptic would say, during the pandemic, everybody was stuck at home. They were doing all these leisure activities. They may have bought all the watches and stuff that they need. Have they pulled forward some of the demand? Is that something that's going to show up in future results where the demand for those type of watches will normalize?
Well, that was really where the idea came from. So I think we've talked about before how one of my favorite source of new ideas is just to go for a simple screen of profitable companies that have net cash on their balance sheet.
Okay.
And it's deceptively simple because I think it's not well appreciated how hard it is for a company to hold cash on the balance sheet. If you're the CEO of a company and you need to hit your stock price or your earnings per share targets to get your bonus, like you don't want to keep the cash. You want to
No.
invest it in like things like marketing. You want to do acquisitions,
Buybacks or
buy back stock.
Yeah.
And so just by merely having a large cash position on your balance sheet, to me, that shows evidence that the business is being prudently managed conservatively and is managed for the long run because they're being patient for future opportunities. And Garmin kept popping up. Like I have, like when I see Garmin on the list, my first thought is, well, why do I want to own like a car GPS maker?
That's right.
Right. But then over time, I dug more into the business. I saw that they have a great track record of pivoting the business where necessary, market leading position in a lot of different areas, and a really good capital allocation track record, which we'll get into later. And so it was worth digging deep into. And so back to your point about the pull forward of demand from COVID, that was why the stock was available at an attractive price.
Yeah.
Because during COVID, especially for some of their fitness products, like their bike, like they do these bike monitors and these things that you can put your bike in and ride inside your house.
Yeah.
That demand for those products soared during COVID and then fell back down to earth after that because everybody already had one.
Just like the Peloton story, for sure. Yeah.
And that happened across a variety of their businesses, including the boating business, including the watch business.
Yes.
And the stock fell like 50% or something like that as demand normalized. But this is what we're looking for. We want to buy good companies with bright futures at attractive prices.
That's right.
And we thought the share price was attractive.
Okay, so a great overview. So we talked about the watch business. Why don't you give a little introduction or the thesis about the other businesses and how they all go together for Garmin?
Yeah. So the marine business makes supplies for boats. And these are not cruises or like military boats. These are
sailboats, power boats,
little boats that you might have, or yachts. Garmin is the leading provider of equipment for these boats. So think of things like the sound system in the boat. They make like chart plotters. Our founder David, he has a boat that has Garmin equipment in it.
Sure.
Yeah, and they are the best provider. They're the industry leader at this. They have good brand, good market share in what they're doing, and they continue to make acquisitions to build that position.
And they bought out their competition in the music business, right?
So they previously owned a business called Fusion Audio, and then they bought another competitor in the marine audio business called JL Audio a little while later. And kind of maybe as a side note to the antitrust discussion is that these are so small, like these markets are so small that they usually fly under the radar for antitrust regulators. But if you talk to the channel, so I've talked to a few people who work in the boating industry, they're, not very pleased. So to put it mildly, that Garmin is snapping up all these suppliers.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is.
That's the way it is. Okay, so it has and it's a market leader, of course, in boating, as you mentioned.
Yes, and then they have aviation, which is mostly focused on the light jets market.
These are not business jets. These
not
are
even business.
Okay,
these are like the tiny hobbyist jets that they're buying.
Got it. The little Cessnas. These are not so commercial type planes. Okay.
And they provide avionics, the control dashboard, and those kinds of things for these planes. They are the market leader. So one of the things that they made, for example, is this tool where if for whatever reason the pilot, and you're probably by yourself because it's a small plane, if the pilot faints, the plane will land itself back on the runway, right? So
sounds good to me.
These kinds of things.
Yeah.
And they dominate this market. They're by far the largest supplier, and they continue to add new categories.
And they sell directly to the airplane manufacturer, or there's aftermarket parts as well, or aftermarket,
Yeah.
you upgrade, for example.
Yeah. So for aviation, it's largely to the manufacturers.
Okay, the original manufacturer.
Yeah.
Same thing with marine, or I guess people could upgrade their music system or upgrade their Garmin on their boats as well, right? So
Marine is a little bit different because the person who's buying the boat usually goes through a distributor. So it's a little harder to exactly break out how much of their sales are to the boat makers versus the end consumer. But I think the important thing to understand about Garmin and why it differs from like some of the other fitness related companies that we've seen come up and blow up over the few years is that they have so many different parts of their business that is very diversified. So, for example, last year, the boating market was very weak, but that's only one part of their business. The outdoor business, the watch business, and the auto business are doing very well.
yeah.
And so there is this diversification benefit that's inherent to the Garmin portfolio that smooths out the results and allows them to continue to make cash flow.
Okay, so we talked about a bunch of divisions. They also have talk about the auto division as well.
Yep. So the auto division used to be focused on the GPS
Yep.
that you buy and put in your car. They've pivoted that slightly, and they still have a decent market for GPSs for things like motorcycles and RVs, and in Europe for whatever reason they still largely use those GPS systems.
Wow, did not know that. I would assume maybe some emerging markets are still use those products for sure. Okay,
but then one of the things that Garmin wants to do is they have a good culture. They want to keep their good employees, right? So as they saw that the car GPS business was declining, they wanted to keep the talent. And so they've pivoted that business into in-car GPS related equipment. So they have, they're selling infotainment systems to automakers. They're selling these things called domain controllers. That's been a big driver of their sales because of a new contract win lately.
okay,
And while these are not spectacular businesses in and of themselves, they are using additional Garmin manufacturing and research capabilities that they already have. So it's just a way for them to, again, keep the people that they have.
okay. So did we cover every business unit?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And like they're generally good businesses. Like they're not Google or Microsoft level margins, but they have decent margin and surprisingly fast growing. Their outdoor watch business has grown double digits for quite a while, and maybe that's just because of the market overall has been growing. Like people want to do more marathons, people want to go mountain climbing. Like these are growing activities, and so I think they're going to continue to find new ways to add to the portfolio over time.
And it's also an acquisitive company too, right? So we talked about the acquisitions made in boating. I assume it is on the hunt for ancillary products and services that it can sell more to customers in those segments over time.
So they usually make little acquisitions of companies that you or I might never have heard of, but they are an industry leader in the thing that they're providing.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the 2 marine audio acquisitions that they did.
Yeah.
Those were the leading brands for that market. They did another deal called Aerodata, which provides flight tracking analytics for commercial planes. And that's the leading provider of that. And so those are the types of acquisitions that they do. They're usually very small relative to Garmin as a whole. Generally very fast payback in terms of like the price that they're paying. And in the absence of deals, they'll buy back stock when the stock is cheap, which they've done. They don't buy back stock when they think the stock's not cheap, which is
Has a healthy dividend too.
and they have a very healthy dividend. which they continue to pay because the founder of the company owns a lot of stock in the business,
Yeah.
and that's what he uses to survive on.
So I think for years, probably Garmin had maybe a hardware multiple, right? Generally, hardware companies don't have as much recurring revenue. They can face a lot more disruption, competition. You generally don't pay that high a multiple for a hardware stock. I remember when Apple used to have a hardware multiple too. So a lot of things you talked about in Garmin are very exciting. They sound more software-y and recurring revenue and things you can't live without. And so as the company has evolved over the last few years, and certainly the last year or so, the valuation obviously is now trading as if it's a more software type recurring revenue business. Is that the case, and does that make sense for Garmin going forward?
Well, one of the things that I like about Garmin is how unpromotional the management is. So there's a lot of companies that they try to create a narrative that they are a recurring revenue business,
Yeah.
that they're not a hardware business, but you're not going to get that from Garmin.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they are. And from time to time, analysts will try and tease out these elements to make Garmin, ask if Garmin is really more special than what it seems.
Yes.
So they'll ask questions like, well, like, what's the retention rate of your customers? Like, what's the repeat purchase rate of your watches?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, yeah, the management will be like, well, we just focus on selling watches. Like,
Yeah.
they don't really, they're not trying to create a narrative that they're disrupting anything. They're just going out there and selling watches.
Yeah.
And so I think over time, there has been a little bit of an improvement to their services business line. Like, there is a subscription that you can charge for things. It's called Garmin Connect,
Yeah.
but it's not a material driver of their business going forward. And I think the management understands that, is that instead of trying to be cute with the business model and try to get a higher multiple because you're driving service revenues, they understand what makes the success of the business is making good products, having good engineering. And that's what the management is rightly focused on.
So Garmin right now is sitting with about $3 billion net in cash. I think they have a share buyback program in place, but as you mentioned, they're probably looking to buy back the stock if the missed earnings expectations or what have you, and there was a material drop in the stock. It's been a serial dividend raiser as well. It's always on the hunt for acquisitions. It's a very focused research and development company as well, always coming out with new and better products and trying to be the market leader. Your take on Garmin and where you see it in the next few years? What will this company look like? Is it more of the same?
Their core markets continue to grow, and they continue to gain market share within those categories as well. So they're starting off at a pretty good place. I think the good thing about these kind of companies that are well managed is that they're going to find new ways to surprise you on the upside.
Yeah.
When TFI International, the business that we've always talked about, we never saw that they were going to get into the less than truckload segment.
No idea. You never saw that Microsoft was going to get into the cloud business, right? You can't see these things, right? Yeah.
And so, but then you do trust that the management of Garmin is going to do the right thing, that they're always looking for ways to add to the portfolio. And maybe one day they'll do an acquisition that enters into a new adjacency that you don't foresee. And then the stock will go up like 50%, right? So
if we haven't hit the nail over the head for you, it's management, and talk. So before we finish the conversation, let's talk a little bit about the management team, the founders at Garmin, and the capital allocation. Of course, you touched on, but maybe a little bit more specific.
Yep. So the CEO is Clifton Pemble. He's been with the business for a long time. The company was founded by two people, one of which is dead now.
Sorry to hear. Yeah.
And the other one is Dr. Min.
Yeah.
Which is, Garmin.
Yep.
And he still remains the largest shareholder of the business and has never sold a share.
Yeah. Wow.
So incentives are certainly in line.
Yeah.
And when I talk to the management team, one of the things that they're very proud of at Garmin is the fact that they're not a Silicon Valley business,
Yeah.
right? They're not fighting for techies in San Francisco.
Are they in Ohio?
In Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Yep. So
not so far from Ohio.
it's a little bit of a different vibe.
Mm-hmm.
The people that work for Garmin like the fact that they're creating products that they themselves are going to be using.
We just bought a company from Ohio. We can talk about that sometime in the future.
Yes.
But it's we don't need to have every company located in Silicon Valley for sure. There's a different vibe. But so you're Kansas City, you're Garmin. Garmin is no joke. It's a decent sized company now. Right. How do they attract and retain top talents to work in Kansas City?
Well, they have offices around the world.
Got it.
Garmin is a vertically integrated business. Mm-hmm. They, unlike a lot of hardware tech businesses, they actually proprietarily design all their products. They're not using third-party hardware. Mm-hmm. Like they're designing the components. I think they have 1,500 patents or something like that. So these are like no one else can make what Garmin makes. And
they make their own. They can't make their own chips, do they?
Chips, no.
No, but
but like for example, the reason why behind the solar charging is something that Garmin figured out themselves.
Beautiful.
And so I think one of the things that attracts people to work for Garmin is that, you're actually making cool things. Yeah. And they have an experimentation culture there where if you have an idea for a new watch, right? Like you have the permission to go and create that product.
Hunter watch.
Yeah. Okay. If you want to make a Hunter watch, you can make it.
Don't know where I came up with that one, but yes. Okay.
And that I think that people really like that kind of structure.
Yeah.
So and then I think I kind of avoided your question about the incentives.
Yeah.
Is that Garmin is based in Europe. Like their official corporate office is based out of Europe, where for whatever reason, their CEO just makes a lot less, like their executive team makes a lot less than what American companies make. And this is true not just for Garmin, but for European companies in general.
Okay.
Their executives are compensated, like they make good money, but they're not nearly compensated to the same degree that US executives are. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that's like there is an element of, we're in this together. It's not I'm here to make $100 million for myself and then like try and pay everybody nothing. Mm-hmm. Like there is a team element that you feel when you're studying a company like Garmin.
Very nice. So I think Garmin hits a lot of the checklist that we're looking for long-term compounding type businesses, right? Smart capital allocators, a decent ownership by management, thoughtful capital allocation, great returns on invested capital. And you never know, when you put all those elements in place, you never know where the next catalyst is going to come. It's not obvious. There's no obvious catalyst with Garmin. But Ernest, there doesn't always have to be an obvious catalyst with your investments.
No, I think oftentimes people will ask, well, why don't you own this stock, or why don't you own that stock? Mm-hmm. And the reason is usually that I never looked at it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like maybe I just never studied the business. Mm-hmm. Like there's no reason that I don't own a lot of these great businesses that exist.
Fair enough. We can't. I think we own a good degree of wonderful businesses in our portfolio, and
when we were starting to look at Garmin, it was available at what we considered to be an unusually attractive price for a company of this quality, even if it may not immediately appear to be that way.
Yeah. I think that's a great overview. Any final points to add on the name?
No, I hope you get your watch for Hanukkah.
I hope I get my watch too. Wink, wink. So it's been a pleasure with this podcast. Lots of fun talking about Garmin, a newish name in our portfolio. And we'll see you back here real soon. Thank you for joining us.